Yeah, thank you very much, Nigel, for that very flattering introduction, and welcome anyone who's watching tonight. I know I've got a few friends and who've not seen me talk before, so yeah, sorry about that. But yeah, I'm going to start off with a bit of an introduction about myself, and then I will crack on about the talk where I went in search of the spoonbill sandpiper in 2014, and also got to see some fantastic wildlife of the Russian Far East. Okay, so here we go. Right, so I'm originally from St Helens, and St Helens is famous for a few things like rugby league, and one of its most famous exports is Johnny Vegas. And one of my claims to fame is I went to school with Johnny Vegas. So there's Johnny Vegas in the middle of the school photo there, and you can just see down to the bottom right, there's some guy with a Beatles haircut and a cheesy grin, and that's me. So one of my claims to fame is I went to school with Johnny Vegas. Now, St Helens, it's got like an industrial heritage, which is part of the reason why I'm there, because my grandfather came from Ireland to work down the coal pits there. But even though it's very industrial, I was brought up just on the outskirts of a place called Rainford. I was lucky that all my life I lived in this house with a long back garden, well vegetated, wood at the back to play in, and Lancashire mosslands behind. So fabulous for birds and wildlife from a young age. So, I mean, there's me probably aged 2 or 3 holding a little baby blackbird in the back garden. And my mum used to feed the birds, and so I quite from a young age got into birds and bird watching. And there's me looking a little bit miserable. I think we'd been to Leighton Moss and I'd not seen the bittern that I was hoping to see. So I started bird watching from somewhere between 10 and 12. Now, I was also exposed to dead birds from a young age because my dad, he used to go shooting, and so there's me and a pink-footed goose, probably about age 2. Now, before you all start booing him, he did turn away from the dark side of the force. And thankfully, in the latter years, I managed to we had a few good holidays up in Scotland, drinking whiskey and wildlife watching. And there's my dad with a cold tit at Lochgarten. Fabulous place to go summer and winter, but if you go in winter, it's like something from a Disney film. You know, you just get a handful of seed and you've got 3 cold tits on your hand, and crested tits sort of coming, eyeballing you. So it's a fabulous place to go. So I suppose being exposed to dead birds from a young age, it's not surprising that I got into taxidermy as a teenager. And I suppose it was just a matter of natural progression that I moved on from stuffing birds to filling teeth. Before you all start having a fit, that photograph was taken well pre-pandemic. I look more like this nowadays, so that's what I tend to look like during the daytime. But after I left Liverpool University from dental school, now being from St Helens, and I wasn't into rugby league, I'm more of a football man. So I had to leave because, they won't tolerate you in St Helens if you don't like rugby league. But luckily for me, I met Rianne when I was at Liverpool, and she's my girlfriend now, my wife. Been together 30 years next year, fingers crossed, touch wood. Yeah, say a little prayer. And so she's been looking after me ever since then. And also, luckily for me, Rianne comes from Anglesey, and Anglesey is for birds. Yeah. So it's really, really good for birds. And she's from Chemice Bay. And so when we came in 96, as well as being good for birds and being a young dentist, tooth decay was also varied and plentiful. So the mere mention of a new dentist coming to town and a queue would form around the corner straight away. So here we had 2 young, newly qualified dentists in an area where there was like very, very little dental care back at the time. So we were set up as a captive breeding program. So here's 3 little baby dentists. There's Nia, Reese and Sean. Over the years, I've tried to expose them to nature by doing things like putting elephant hawk moths on their face and sort of taking them rock pooling at Kemlyn. Ironically, Reese is more into cooking now, so I'm looking at that look in his eye now, and I'm thinking he's probably thinking about, lobster thermidor more than anything else. And then we got Sean. There's a shot of him up in Scotland again, when we were feeding cold tits on another holiday with the family. So, but before we had children, I did have that awkward conversation with my wife. It was like, before we go any further, right, is there, can we just clarify this? Can I go on at least one decent bird watching trip a year somewhere? And to be fair, she was fine by that. And we sort of so over the years I've managed to sort of travel quite widely and extensively to see a lot of good places and good birds and wildlife. So it's taken me places like North Africa, to the edge of the Sahara Desert, to see things like cream-coloured corsairs, and also to sort of Central America to see the resplendent quetzal, and Cuba to see the smallest bird in the world, the male bee hummingbird. And but I've also had to take a bullet for the team now and then. There's a shot of me at Euro Disney in 2013, I think it was. And the next shot is a photograph of me absolutely living the dream. So there's me, Disneyland Paris. Yeah, Cinderella's castle in the background. So there was a slight carrot. So I behaved when we were at 5 days at Disney. We then went to Germany for a long weekend afterwards to Waldshut Weltvergel Park. It's the biggest bird zoo in the world. It's got some really exotic stuff. They got like shoebill stork, and I don't think I'll ever manage to get to New Caledonia, but they've got Kagoo and some all really crazy stuff. It's like Chester Zoo. It's just a massive zoo, but they've got really well kept, but they've got some really cool stuff there. So there's one bird with a really strange bill, the shoebill stork of Uganda. But tonight we're talking about the spoonbill sandpiper, another sort of bird with a very strange bill. And Heritage Expeditions they're the company that you go with if you want to see this on its breeding grounds. Now, the spoonbill sandpiper, it's the only bird that's born with a spoon-shaped bill. Even the spoonbill only develops a spoon-shaped bill after about 2 or 3 days. And it's just really just such a very cute bird. And it's definitely in there, one of the 100 birds to see before you die book. But unfortunately, the spoonbill sandpiper is one of the fastest declining bird species in the Russian Red Data book. And it's a very sort of very specific specialist species, because even like in the 1970s, when it was probably at its peak, there was still only about 2,000 pairs. It's just the population has declined by 90% in 30 years. So back in 2012, they thought that there was only about 100 pairs left in the wild. And it's in trouble when it's on the front of a book called Facing Extinction. Now, the reason why it's declined is due to several reasons, like habitat loss. There's been large-scale reclamation of coastal development of many crucial non-breeding stop-off spots when it's been going between the breeding and the wintering grounds. A lot of pollution at intertidal mudflats. Hunting and trapping is a bit of a nightmare, because in places like China, they put mist nets up and leave them there for weeks. Like, they'll go and catch the birds that are in there, but sometimes they forget them, leave them, and the birds get caught and die, and it's just devastating. And also, they don't have very much breeding success. Generally, from a clutch of 4, they only tend to raise about 1 chick out of 4. So there's a lot of things going against it, really. It did also reflect like some of the things that were happening in on the East Asian flyway, basically down, sort of the Western Pacific side. Problems being faced by other species like great knot. But the thing with spoonbill sandpiper is it's never had a very big population. Maximum was only about 2,000 pairs, and it breeds. If looking at the map there, sort of in the top right there, so it's in the Russian Far East. And it migrates down sort of through on the coast of sort of China and Korea, and then it winters in Southeast Asia and the Bay of Bengal, places like that. Okay, so you can sort of see on this map, there's all these little dots. That kind of shows you sort of the different areas where they stop off, going between the breeding and the wintering grounds. Now, unfortunately, this is some of the things that happens. They put the mist nets up trying to catch waders to eat them, and there's one in a net. Thankfully, that one was caught in time and was released. So there are various projects going on by sort of Birds Russia, and also the Wildfowl and Wetlands Trust and several other partners trying to sort of bring this bird back from the brink. Educating people on the flyway, educating kids, saying, look, you've got a really special bird here. And fair play to actually Wader Quest. They've done a pretty cool book, Yuri, the spoonbill sandpiper, which it's a good one for kids there, and just explains like all the perils that it goes through on its migration. So there's one being released, which is great to see. And also educating locals that the spoonbill sandpiper, people from around the world want to come and see the special bird that you have. So, it is a source of income for you. Wildlife travellers, tourists will come and they'll pay good money to stay in your areas just to see this special bird. And Also, a project was set up at Slimbridge to form an ARC population, because when they first started doing sort of all the work into them, probably about 2012, they brought a captive. They brought eggs and chicks over to Slimbridge, about 20 birds, to try and set up a captive breeding population, which I will mention a little bit later. So this is sort of the habitat at Slimbridge, where they're trying to recreate Arctic tundra-like conditions to sort of breed the spoonbill sandpipers down there. But probably more importantly, is they've started this head starting scheme. Now, what head starting is when the birds first arrive back on the breeding grounds in the northeast Russia, they find the nest and they wait until that they've laid the eggs, right? So you've got a full clutch, and then what they do is they will take the eggs away, right? And because it's very early in the incubation, the spoon and in the breeding season, the spoonbill sandpipers will relay again. Now, bear in mind, they only sort of tend to rear about 1 out of the 4 eggs that actually hatch. Only one of them, so like 25% success rate. But with the head starting, they take those 4 eggs, they breed them in a local sort of captive breeding centre, rear them, and in August, when they're ready, when they're fledged, they release them onto the Arctic tundra with the other wild birds, and they will follow them back on the migration down to Southeast Asia. So some of the key achievements, this is a bit of a more up-to-date thing. For the first time, spoonbill sandpipers have been tracked with satellite tags, and they found some interesting information. And they don't just follow the coast. Some birds fly all the way over mainland China to winter in sort of Burma and sort of Bangladesh, that sort of area. A captive population has been established to try and safeguard against extinction with breeding plans in place. They've had, they have managed to breed some chicks, but not a lot. I think it's a lot more complex than what they were hoping for. But the head starting has boosted the numbers of young spoonbill sandpipers bred each year in the wild by 1/4, and 163 birds have been released so far, increasing the output of the global population by 20%. So that's, look, fingers crossed, hopefully looking promising. So that is helping. But they do have problems where they breed. There's lots of skewers that will predate them. There's stoats, and there are still hunters and collectors that will, they will pay sort of ridiculous money for local poor villagers to get them a specimen for the collection. But what really got me into the Spoonie was watching saving this video DVD from the Wildfowl and Wetlands Trust. If you ever get a chance to watch it, it's a good watch, and it explains about the whole project about trying to bring this bird back from the brink of extinction. So most people who are lucky enough to see it usually go to places like Thailand in the winter to see the spoonbill sandpiper on the salt pans where it overwinters. These sort of places. But I don't know. Nature Trek, I can't find the original newsletter, but literally it was something like this. It had a picture of a spoonbill sandpiper on breeding plumage on the front of it, and it landed on my doorstep about a week after I'd watched the Wildfowl and Wetlands Trust video, and it essentially was saying, do you want to see this bird? And it's like, yes, I do. So less than 12 months later, I was in Russia, and so that's a very pretty shot of Red Square. But I kind of kicked myself. I didn't actually go right into Moscow, probably just due to time. But I might have been slightly traumatized and thought it did look a little bit like Cinderella's castle. So I started the main trip where we ended up on the outskirts of Moscow in a field, listening to corncrakes and looking at things like blides, reed warbler, and redback shrikes, sort of like typically sort of northeast European type birds. And we had about an afternoon or so birding there. Now, this was just around Moscow. Being with Nature Trek, we obviously had to look at a few plants as well. So, but this was a very pretty species of cow wheat that we actually had. So other birds that we had as well included things like blue throat. We had they really close, singing really well, and so we saw a few good birds just in the afternoon birding around Moscow. But then we went on the 7.5-hour flight to Petropavlovsk, Kamchatka. It was an overnight flight, but because it was midsummer, most of the flight was actually through the Arctic Circle. So it wasn't actually that far. Because like when you look at a world map, like Kamchatka looks like it's like as far away as Australia, but obviously the Earth's round, and it wasn't actually that bad a flight. And as we were coming in there, you saw there's like all these snow-capped volcanic mountains of Kamchatka, sort of very pretty. And then you land, and then you realise that a lot of the scenery wasn't visible because there was quite a lot of low cloud. We flew with Aeroflot, which was actually a very good, great flight. Cause a lot of rumours of what the Aeroflot used to be like, but it seemed very, very up to date, which was brilliant. That lady doesn't look too happy because obviously she thought I was taking a photo of her. I did take some photos when we came in. There was loads of MiGs at the end of the runway, but I quickly deleted them because someone said you're going to get all your camera gear confiscated. So I thought, well, I didn't want that at the start of the trip. So I think we had about one afternoon birding when we actually got to Kamchatka on the actual peninsula there. So seeing some cracking birds, things like there's male eye-browed thrush there. Three-toed woodpecker. We had things like rustic bunting, and just kind of sort of the sort of birds that you might expect, sort of just east of the Urals. Other familiar things like swallowtail butterfly, the Kamchatka black lily, and also no forgetting that you're in the ex-Soviet Union there with a nice statue of Lenin. So after just a very short period, we were going to spend the next 12 days on the Professor Kromov, or the Spirit of Enderby, as it was known. It was registered in Russia because then it wouldn't have any problems getting through Russian waters. We were basically going to be concentrating our trip top right, near where the Spoonies breed, starting off in southern Kamchatka, working our way over to the Commander Islands, and then up to Chukotka. So that basically shows our trip. Just working our way up the coast there. Now, sorry, mouse drying up a bit. We left the port, and it did look a little bit grotty, to be honest. But as we were getting on the boat there, everyone came on deck, and I remember the first time we came on deck, and it was a bit drizzly, and it was a bit weird, really, because you're on the other side of the world. It felt a teeny weeny bit homesick, which was a bit strange. And I was worrying that I was going to be seasick, Steve, because I've never spent any significant period of time on a boat, and I think I'd had like one overnighter to France, and I threw up on it. So I thought, what if this is going to be just like horrendous? So I took tablets and patches, but in the end, I just had one of those bands that go on your wrist, and it just sort of as long as it fills your brain, that's the main thing. So thankfully, I wasn't seasick at all. But then I tripped over this thing. And then you look at it, this bright orange thing, it's like Void's data recorder. It's like, oh my God, this is the black box for the ship. And I was aware that we were going over one of the deepest ocean trenches in the world. And you think, oh my God. And it just kind of brought it home that, like, we're going to the middle of nowhere. And I suppose one reason why I was a tad homesick was when I was at Heathrow Airport about to fly out to Moscow, Nia got my wife's phone and phoned me and went, Daddy, don't go to Russia. Don't go to Russia. Come home. I was like, I've got it. Sorry. Yeah. Spoonbill Sandpiper. And then she gave the phone to little Sean, and it was like, Daddy, please come home. And it was like, oh my God, like sort of majorly tugging on the heartstrings. But, obviously I did go in the end, and as soon as we left port, we're going out this big bay. Great scenery in the background, and quickly the birds started to take my mind off it, and it's like, Brunich's guillemot, or thick-billed mure as they call them in America. And then we did also have spectacled guillemot, but it was very distant. But this is it's a subspecies of pigeon guillemot called Kurile guillemot. It's like a halfway between spectacled guillemot and pigeon guillemot. So it's starting to get a bit of a pale eye ring, and it's only got a little bit of white in the wings. So that's quite a good bird potential split. So fantastic scenery as you're heading out, and then you come across this little group of auks, and there's tufted puffin, Brunich's guillemot, horned puffin, and then top right there's ancient murrelet. Ancient murrelet, I saw one lucky enough in 1992 on the island of Lundy in the Bristol Channel, and I think loads of people have got these little models that Ray Turley was banging out at the time, because it was like one of the rarest birds that had ever been in Britain. So finally, since 1992, catching up with ancient murrelet, which was great. So the first place we stopped, we had an overnight sail up north, and we were stopping at a place called the Zupanova River. So we did our first sort of rib ride, so to speak, on the Zodiacs, and we headed off. When you go off on a boat on these, because you're going to somewhere really remote, they don't want to leave without you. So when everyone's given a number. When you get off the boat, you flip it over so it's red, right? And then when you get back on the boat, you turn it around to black. So it's just so that you know that they don't actually leave without you. So, as the trip goes on, you never know. There might be someone on the trip that sort of bugs you a little bit. So, if you wanted to get rid of them, you've got to remember that sort of when you get back on the boat, you turn the number back over, right? And then by the time you get back to them, like a day or two later, the birds will have had them. So anyway, we're doing our first sort of beach landing, we sort of heading off up the river there, which was all very. Oh, sorry, I'll go back there. Cat, there's a shot of Cat and Kenny at the front of the Zodiac there as we were heading up the Zupanova River. And the first things that we bumped into was a nice group of lager seals. I think that's actually a subspecies of harbour seal. I'm sure Kenny will know. They've probably been split by now. Other birds that we were bumping into, things like the far eastern curlew, like ours, longer bill, browner rump. And then on the sandbank, there was a few different species of tern there. The longipennis subspecies of common tern. That was the first one that did a bit of a flyby, like our common tern, but with an all black bill. And then this cracker went past, Aleutian tern. It's like one of these fabulous birds. British birders, like it's like in folklore. I think 1978 there was one on the Farne Islands. So there's been like one record in Britain ever. So they're kind of quite similar to sooty and bridal tern. Just they've got an all grey back. So it was great to sort of catch up with Aleutian tern there, fabulous bird. And then we headed a bit further up the river, and there was a nest in a tree of Stella's sea eagle, right? So 2 seconds there. I just need to check this. What's going on? 2 seconds. Right here. Chris, thank you. So sorry about that. So Stella's sea eagle, right? It's the biggest eagle in the world, I think, by weight, right? I think there are ones that are a little bit longer and with a slightly bigger wingspan, but it's definitely the heaviest. And it's just absolutely stonking looking bird. So there we go. It's so Stella's sea eagle, absolutely amazing. And we got really fabulous views. They just weren't bothered. We were in the river at the base of the trip, probably because, they didn't feel threatened by us because, it could probably just eat us if it wanted to. So, and when they fly, they've got the lovely white tail and white flanks and white leading edge to the wing. So after we'd had a good bit of wildlife there, we went ashore to the little village there because where the estuary goes into the sea, we get massive numbers of salmon. So there's like a salmon canning factory. So we got to have some lovely grilled salmon, and there was also salmon caviar, which wasn't my cup of tea. I was kind of dithering a bit, and the guy that stuffing the bread in his mouth, he's Australian, and because I was dithering, he just said, for God's sake, just stick the thing in your mouth. He wasn't Irish. I know it sounded like he was Irish, but he was actually Australian. But it was a bit like being on I'm a Celeb to get me out of here. So after we'd fed up a little bit, we went out to the back, and there was singing Siberian ruby throat, so cracking male Siberian ruby throat. And I think we also had there was nesting long-toed stint, but that didn't show particularly well. But it was great to see singing male Siberian ruby throat. And then we were back onto the boat, and we're heading out across the deep ocean gorge, heading to the Commander Islands, the westernmost of the Aleutian chain, going to Bering Island. So as we were heading out there, we got species like glaucous winged gull, fork-tailed storm petrel. You can see how close the birds were just off the front of the ship. So just brilliant to see. And then there was a bit of a talk was going on, and I didn't want to join purely because it's like, start the trip and you might miss something. And there's a group of Baird's beak whales went past, and a lot of the people didn't manage to get it, but I think we did bump into another group later on. So thankfully, those people that were really distressed that they missed Baird's beak whale got it later on in the trip. But it was also a fantastic trip to get used to cetaceans and whales, especially, which I'd not had great deal of experience with in the past. So humpback whales. There's the classical hump on the back, and as they go over, tufted puffin about to fly past, and they got these white patches on the undertail, which they tend to be different between different individuals. So it's a good way of identifying them. So they're the big show-offs of the whale world. So the humpback whales are great, and we saw quite a few, and there'll be a few more photographs later on. So again, nice flybys of things like tufted puffin. Dahl's porpoise is a cracker. It's like a mini killer whale, sort of coloured porpoise. It's like turbo powered, and they make a lot of splashing. I think it's called rooster tailing, but we had quite a few of those, and you can always see them coming because they make such a splash. Finally got albatross, because I'd been to Australia and South Africa, and just timing didn't work out, or bad weather, so I never got to see any albatrosses until this trip. And we had plenty of Laysan albatrosses. The breeds on the Laysan Islands, but when they're not breeding, they come up north onto the sort of the Bering area. So as we went onto Bering Island, we did a beach landing, and there was actually a Russian guard who was just checking our papers when we were there. It was a bit of a funny place. It was like the sort of place where ships went to die, and to be honest, it had like the ambiance of Kirby Industrial Estate in the middle of the winter, really. And the first birds we bumped into, there we are, sort of seeing what wildlife we can see, sort of typical birders, like sort of this big, some historic statue there of Vitus Bering, and like obviously we're looking in the other direction, seeing what we can see. Lapland buntings were sort of quite common around there, and tree sparrows was something that I didn't really expect, but they're actually quite common up the coast there and on the Commander Islands. But this was something more likely that we really wanted to see. This was rock sandpiper. Now, rock sandpiper is essentially what replaces purple sandpiper in the Pacific region, and they look a bit like a hybrid between a purple sandpiper and a dunlin. So again, it's one of those birds I'd always really wanted to see. I've seen things like surfbird in the past, but I've always wanted to see rock sandpiper. I still need black turnstone now. Other waders that were quite common there was the Mongolian race of lesser sandplover, also called like Mongolian sandplover. As we walk along, there was a little nest of them just at the side of the footpath. And then the ducks that were common in the sea there, things like harlequin duck, were great to see. Now, they did a little bit of a brief historical tour, because there used to be a fur factory there in the late 1800s from actually a Californian company, because they came up there because there was lots of sea otters and the sort of fur seals that they were slaughtering, and this was an artist's house, because there was a lot of sea otter skulls, because they were almost taken to the brink of extinction up there, because they were sort of taken for the fur pelts in ridiculous numbers. So I think the artist, he kind of nailed them to his house and put the fake blood on there. Ironically, I'm not sure they get many visitors there, but he wasn't in, because we were going to see if we can buy some of his paintings, but he was out. Yeah. So other things that used to live there but don't now. So this is Stella's sea cow. I think there's only 2 whole skeletons left in the world, sadly extinct. This is one of them. There's a good replica actually in Edinburgh Natural History Museum, because they're about twice the size of manatees, like what you might see in Florida. They're absolute monsters. Other interesting things there, you got the sort of hexagonal basalt columns, so it's a bit like the Giant's Causeway in Northern Ireland. As I was walking across it, I couldn't help but get the theme tune of Blockbusters out of my head with Bob Holness, because it just always reminds me of that pattern. And I do love the way that wherever you go in the world, there's always a football pitch, whether it's sort of like sub-Saharan Africa, sort of South America, sort of the Bering Sea, there's football pitches there, which is great to see. So after we went to Bering Island, we went across one to Medney, Now, if you look to the right, there's Attu. Now, Attu, it's like sort of right on the international date line. It's the westernmost American Aleutian island. So that's a lot of North American birders and listers. They go there, like in Britain, we might go to Scilly or Shetland. They go to places like Attu because it gets like the other sort of Siberian waifs and strays, which, you know, you've got very little chance of getting on the American list unless you go to these sort of far western islands. And they go there in the film The Big Year. If you've not seen it, it's a little bit cheesy, but it's a feel good film. You know, it definitely recommend seeing The Big Year. Other birds we had there from the sea, the northern fulmars, the Pacific rays. This was quite an unusual white one because most of them are a dark morph. I'll show you in a second. The only pterodroma petrel that we had, this is mottled petrel. They're the same sort of genus as like fierce petrel and things like that. So that was great to see. And then we came across this fantastic group of birds. There's like all the little dark ones, they're northern fulmars of the Pacific race, but most of them were sort of pretty sooty. There's some black-legged and red-legged kittiwakes there. But the main bird here is the big dark albatross. That's short-tailed albatross. It's one of the bigger albatrosses, and it was the only one that we saw. It kind of technically became extinct as a breeding species, I think in the late 1800s, sometime in the 1800s, because the islands where it breeds in Japan, people went onto the islands and totally slaughtered the whole breeding population. But luckily, because it takes them so many years to reach sexual maturity, there was all those years worth of juveniles at sea. So the people left the island once they'd sort of hunted all the birds there, and then over the next the next few decades, they came back and sort of colonized again and started breeding. I think there's about 2,000 pairs, but you know it was you know taken right to the brink of extinction. Now this is Brummy Dave. Now Brummy Dave was my roommate for the trip. I didn't meet him before, but he's a lovely chap. But unfortunately for him, he'd gone for a nap when we went past the short-tailed albatross, so he never got to see it. So after that point, he never slept during the daylight hours when anyone else was on deck. If he wanted a nap, he would be on deck, so that if something got screamed at, something fantastic was going past, he'd wake up and he'd see it, because I think he never got over the fact that he missed short-tailed albatross. So there it is in the middle there. So that's the room that I was sharing. Dave was on the right, and the messy bit on the left was where I was sleeping. So as we got to Medney Island, it was very atmospheric, and we first landed, and we were trying to get onto a winter wren subspecies, and people saying, "Oh, it might be split." And then I thought, well, hold on, I'm trying to photograph a wren here, and it looks just like our wren, and it sounds like our wren. And then the group of people that we were with were like getting close to this Arctic fox, and in the end I thought, look, I've got to go. I've never seen Arctic fox before, so I managed to get up to there, and fair play, it was very tame and didn't flush or anything, so that was great to see, like Arctic fox in summer plumage. And the island was totally covered in Pechora pipits. So after the moment of when I missed one in South Wales, it was great to actually sort of get to this island, which was totally infested with Pechora pipits, so we got great views of many of them. But it was just a lovely atmospheric place, very tall sea cliffs, and very reminiscent of what I've seen of pictures of St Kilda. And it's just nice to be there in the breeding season, like with all the flowers and that, and see some of these seabirds right up close. You know, these are horned puffins, absolutely beautiful. That was a closer shot of the horned puffins in the nesting burrows. Other birds nesting around there, things like glaucous winged gull, red-faced cormorants, and then we got a call because there was they'd come across a group of sea otters, which is fabulous because I'd never seen sea otter before, and they are so cute. The babies are just like little teddy bears, so they were fantastic. And then as they swam away with a large grown baby, they're just sort of like letting them lie on the belly, so it's fantastic to see them there. So that was seeing the sea otters there. So you can sort of see how close, because not a lot of people go up there. The wildlife is very approachable, because now they don't see humans as a threat. They would have done 100 years or so ago. So that's pigeon guillemot, very much like our black guillemot, but the white patch has got a little bit of a black line that goes through it. And other close views of tufted puffin again, and horned puffin. Fabulous looking birds. Love that bird. Nice shot of them together. And when I came back that July, I thought, hold on, if I go to South Stack and see puffin, right, and it only twigged on the last day of July, that's not the best day on Anglesey to look for a puffin. I had an hour on my lunch break on the last day in July, and so I bombed over, and I was there for 20 minutes, no sign of any Atlantic puffins. And then thankfully, like, I had about 5 minutes to go, and like one flew past. So it's just so that I could say that I'd seen all three of the world's puffins in the month of July in 2014. So that was nice to see them all. So other seabirds around there, ones we're familiar with, black-legged kittiwake. We had a few red-legged kittiwakes fly over. Unfortunately, what you've got to appreciate with these sort of trips is weather and conditions can be adverse at times. So there was one afternoon we were supposed to go to a nesting colony of red-legged kittiwakes, but unfortunately the weather was too bad. The winds were in the wrong direction, so we couldn't. So we just had to make do. We found like one in the black-legged kittiwake colony, and we had a few nice ones flying over. So there's a nice shot of the pigeon guillemot, as I say, the one that's like black guillemot in flight. And the thing that was amazing over there is it was just like being in a sea of birds. There was just so many birds. There's common guillemot, or common mure as they call them in the States. And then amongst all this, then all of a sudden, I mean, they're there because there's lots of fish there, and the humpback whale is there because there's lots of fish there. The other boat there's a guy called Costa. Now, Costa was great. He was Russian, didn't really speak, quiet man, but very nice, friendly face, and he would get you right up close. If you were in Costa's boat, you knew you were going to get the best view of a lot of the wildlife, because he was straight in there. So he'd get you right up close and personal to these sort of like tail-slapping humpback whales. And just fabulous seeing them just sort of porpoising out the water there, and the fabulous sort of scenery in the background. It just was such a really amazing place there. And like the shape of the eye, it's like King Kong. You know, some of the places it's like you think, oh, this, are we going to Skull Island next? As these sort of fantastic shapes just appeared out of the mist. So some of the days it was beautiful when it was really flat, calm, great photography. So that's lace and albatross again. As we were moving away from Medney, there was like these massive flocks of little tiny black birds, like auklets of some sort, but they never allowed us to get close enough because they'd always fly off when you got within about, sort of half a mile of them. And luckily I got one popped up and I got some shots of it. And it was this little thing, the whiskered auklet. But it was nice to at least get a brief glimpse of it, because we did see lots of them, just none close enough to actually see the whiskers on. So I was quite lucky to get that record shot of it. So again, nice calm waters. That's the Fulmar, the dark phase. Yeah, there's Brummy Dave asleep on deck again. And then we had this thing pop up. It's like we were looking at through bins. It's like, what is it? Is it the Loch Ness Monster? It was just like, you didn't know what the hell it was, and then it changed shape a little bit. And then what we realised it was, because it was like a rare day where the sun was shining. It was a northern fur seal, and it was just sticking its flippers out the water to sort of soak up the sun. And then next minute it just plopped underwater, and you can sort of see it swimming past. And then it'd pop up, and I mean the water effects were just fabulous. And then we could see properly what it was when it popped up just at the side of the boat. So that's northern fur seal. And another, I just love the water effect here. So just a few arty shots of like Fulmar, fork-tailed storm petrel, another one of fork-tailed storm petrel there. And we also had bumped into a few little pods of killer whales. But this was one of the best whales, sperm whale. I'd never seen sperm whale before, and the spray is just so much further forward than the hump compared to like things like the humpback whale. And the other thing is that because of the way the blowhole, it's kind of distorted. It's always at 45 degrees to blow and to the left. And as it comes up a bit more, you can see where they've been fighting with giant squid. So you've got these scratch marks all over the back. So as it goes over, the sort of ridge back, and then as the tail flute goes, you can see totally jet black underneath, whereas like humpback whale, it's got the nice white patterning on it. So that's again up at Edinburgh with the kids, so you can see the scale of it. That's a sperm whale skull, and you can see that the whole it's on the left hand side, because that's why it blows out to the left when it does actually come out. So There's good weather. As we're sort of heading west back to the mainland now, you can see the fog bank. So we just had a few birds escorting us out into the fog. I think we saw our last ancient murrelet then, and you just see that fog hanging on in there. We were just riding on the edge of it. And as we went into our last sort of sunset, as we were leaving the Aleutian chain, one of the Aleutian special birds, the red-legged kittiwake, it just followed us into the sunset, which was a nice bird to say goodbye to us as we headed on our journey. So we were heading next to Karajinsky Island, which was just off the coast of a bit close to the coast of Kamchatka. Very Arctic tundra-like feel to this, especially when we were slogging our ways across it. Lots of Lapland buntings in breeding plumage, which was nice to see, and again, very approachable. This was actually one that was taken at Kemlin. It was I found it the day I just dropped my camera off at Cambrian to be repaired, but luckily it hung around for a few days until I got my camera back and I managed to get some nice close shots of it, because you can see how approachable it was. So that was a Lapland bunting on the wintering grounds here in Anglesey, but they're not as bright as they are in the breeding plumage. This is one of Tim Melling's shots. I used just my photos, but I'll mention if one or two aren't mine. This was Tim Melling's, because some of the groups bumped into redneck phalaropes breeding on the island. But you know, we had lots of skewers, like Arctic skewers, and nice views of long-tail skewer as well. Sort of really beautiful looking birds there. And then long-tailed duck in breeding plumage just kind of whizzed past, showing off its fine splendour of its tail. And every little pool on the Arctic tundra seemed to have its own pair of long-tailed ducks. But it was quite hard going, slogging through there, and I think we only lost one or two participants there. I think that was one of the leaders, Nick. I think he's just a bit tired, so I had a bit of a rest there. There's Cat and Kenny. I think Kenny took his glasses off because it's probably getting a bit drizzly that afternoon. But yeah, great. So back on the boat and heading off to our next stop, and we did bump into sort of this rather showy off humpback whale, doing a lot of tail slapping and everything, and getting nice close views. But this was after dinner one night, and Neil, we went out on deck, and he was the first one to finish his dinner. He was out there, and then he showed me the pictures on the back of his camera. Right, while we'd all been finished off dinner, he had a humpback whale breach 9 times. It just kind of jumped out and did this, and it just kept coming closer and closer. And I think he just had a fixed 400 lens, so his shots, they were just all like, it was getting that bit too close, but just amazing. So these were Neil's shots, just to make us all jealous, like, and teach us to sort of dither at the dinner table. So the next island we headed up to was Verkhoturova. Now again, one of these Skull Island-like places. When we approached, it looked a bit murky. Slaty back gull, for any larophiles out there, any people that love gulls. We had lots of slaty back gulls. Funnily enough, Neil said that was his bird of the trip at that point. And I like gulls, but it was like, we'd seen sort of tufted and horned puffins and Steller seagull and Aleutian tern. I did find it a little bit hard to get, but everyone to their own. So this flock of slaty back gulls landed on the boat. So we were actually heading on the right hand side of this picture where the cliff ends. We were going to do a beach landing there. So we came in, and the weather started to pick up then. The murk started to gradually burn away, and we had to walk up this quite a steep slope to get to the top where we were going to. So our nose was in the grass, but gave us a bit of time to do a little bit of botanizing. Things like bird's eye primrose was all very pretty to look at as we were scrambling our way up this embankment, trying our best not to roll backwards, because the consequences were unthinkable. And then we headed off across the top there to there's a nice breeding colony of seabirds. So we were getting to see, because we'd seen horned puffin at the nest, but we'd not seen tufted puffin at this point. So great to see sort of tufted puffin up close, sticking its head out of its burrows. And there's also sort of common guillemots and Brunich's guillemots. I mean, it was a bit like Puffin Island, really, just sort of with more tufted puffins. And so, yeah, just great to see these birds up close there. And that's a nice shot of common guillemot and Brunich's guillemot together. I mean, you can see Brunich's, it's more dark, like a razor bill. It's got that lovely white line above the on the base of the upper mandible. And also one of the features of Brunich's guillemot is the white on the breast goes up to a point under the neck, which it doesn't on common guillemot there. So this pelagic cormorant looks very much like a type, well, a bit more like shags that we get over here. So that was nice to see up close. So yeah, plenty of good stuff to look at, and we weren't far from mainland Kamchatka, so you can see all the snowy peaks on the other side. So there was like a little group of islands going away from this island, and looking closer, you could see there was some Stella's sea lions, and you see the one top left, it says K35. They brand them over there, but instead of tagging them or ringing them, they actually branded them. And this sea lion had travelled from the Commander Islands over to this island, which was a lot closer to the mainland. So we went, when we were leaving, we got on the Zodiacs and we went round to get a closer look at them there. It was really nice to see. We couldn't get too close because the waves were kind of smashing against the rock quite a bit. But they totally covered in seabirds, absolutely. The cliffs were totally covered, predominantly kittiwakes here. But I've never been anywhere with so many seabirds, because there's all these auklets, and there's a big flock of crested auklets here, and it's just amazing seeing them just popping down next to you there. So yeah, it's crested auklet. And they breed in these scree slopes, probably a bit similar to like what little auks do. So that's this crested auklet. And then we got parakeet auklet. It's got a funny shaped beak. It's not really a parakeet shape, but that's kind of why it got its name. And yeah, that's a few more parakeet auklets. So really funny shaped bills on them, funny shaped beaks. And when they fly, they've got a white belly. So that's one of the diagnostic features, because like the crested auklets have got, they're all black on the belly underneath. But we had two of these. It's fantastic. These are least auklets. These are absolutely tiny. Now, 1991, when I was at Spurn, someone gave me this. They found a little auk. Now, these are small enough. This was a sort of, he just found it dead on the beach and he preserved it, and he gave it to me. And so like little auks, they're sort of 17 to 19 centimeters, whereas least auklet is 12 to 14. These are like related to puffins and guillemots, and they're only 12 to 14 centimeters. Now, sparrows are 14 to 16 centimeters. And we did actually have one of these when we're a foggy day. One flew over the boat, and we thought it was a Lapland bunting or something with no tail. And it was just like, everyone thought it was a passerine with a missing tail. And then we realized it was actually a least auklet just flying over, because they're so small. But it was great, because apart from the brief flyover of the one that we didn't really know what it was initially, these were the only two that we saw. So tiny, 12 to 14 centimeters. There was one rhinoceros auklet seen. Unfortunately, I didn't see it, but luckily I'd seen it before in Vancouver, because otherwise I probably would have got a bit stressed out about it, because they tend to breed further south. So we were heading next to the Govan Peninsula. So after we got off the boat, we were headed towards the shore. We went to this was an old Korean fishing vessel, and what had happened is it had run ashore there. So they had to send the Korean the Korean Navy out to get everyone off the boat, and then they took them back. And I think the captain of the ship was he was shot for wasting a government vessel. And so now it's just like a breeding ground for slaty-backed gulls. It's just sort of left there. But what we saw that was quite exciting was the first bear of the trip. It's like Eurasian brown bear, and the Kamchatka subspecies is very big, quite kind of scary looking. Felt a little bit cornered, so he'd walk it because he couldn't really get away there. So he climbed up the cliff a bit and then turned around to face us, and like you can see him burring his claws. It's like, sort of, come and have a go if you think you're hard enough. So that was the first bear that we had on the trip. We were supposed to be going to this place that was nicknamed Bear Gully, but again, it looks like quite a nice day, but there was quite a lot of swell, and the waves were actually smashing onto the shore quite, unpredictably. You can appreciate from here like what the swell is. So we couldn't actually do a landing that afternoon. And when one lady got off the Zodiac to get onto the disembarkment ramp, the swell was so much, it went way above her waist. Luckily, she didn't get swept away or anything, but she got very soggy. But luckily, we were coming back for the afternoon, so she could go and get changed. So that's the dining room facilities on the boat that we're staying on. So this is the Tanitikun Lagoon. I think this was the next day. It was a bit like probably because we had this guy on the left, can't remember his name. He's a nice bloke from the Wirral, but because he had his balaclava on, it looked like an SAS landing as we headed up into this inlet. The leaders had to go ahead because they had paperwork that needed to be checked by. There was some like local Russian wardens that had to check that our papers were okay. So we had a bit of a walk. There were some bears again, so you got to be a bit careful. Some members of the group were given sticks. I think they gave the odd flare gun to someone as well, just in case we did get sort of charged by a bear. And it's against bird watchers' nature to say, look, make noise when you walk around. But bird watchers don't want to make noise because they want to be nice and quiet so they can creep up on birds and get a good view of them. So it's quite difficult, like when you're snooping behind a bush, to actually make some noise because you're worried you're going to flush things, but at the same time you don't want to spook a bear and have a startled bear running at you. So other things we had around there was things like oriental greenfinch, lots of harlequin ducks were flying around here. It was quite dull. We didn't have a lot of really bright days. So this was a shot I got in Iceland in 2012 of harlequin ducks, just to show, because I think they're one of the best ducks on the planet, and this really highlights their colours. There's some volcanic hot springs around there as well. And then it was back on the boat, and obviously Dave, not wanting to take any chances, have a little bit of a snooze again. We go down and check he was still breathing every now and then. So we also had, again, orcas on that trip. Yeah, we had a few pods, but none came really close. But again, I've been lucky. 2012, when we went to Iceland, where we were staying in that blue hotel there was orcas just outside the window. We were lucky enough that we went on a boat trip. They were going under the boat, and also sort of went to one fjord the next day, and there was spy hopping coming out. It was just amazing creatures. So I think that evening we went to Pakachi Lagoon. We were hoping to go through this little this inlet, but again, they thought it was going to be too dodgy, so we had to abort on this one, which is a shame because you get big numbers of Stella's eider in there, and they occasionally get spectacled eider. So it's the only chance I've ever been anywhere near where I've had a sniff of it. But this is a bit of a cheap photo. There's this was taken down at Torquay, Living Coast. Sadly, it's full because of COVID. It's gone bust, and it's closed down now. But they had a breeding population of spectacled eiders down there, and breeding plumes, just unbelievable, fantastic looking duck. So yeah, bit of nice weather, which was good. Every day before we went out on an expedition on the boats, Rodney, the skipper and expedition leader, he'd tell you what the plan was, what we were going to look for, what we had to do, and what we didn't have to do. So we'd have that briefing every day. Because we were now getting into, I think, like northern Kamchatka, southern Chukotka. This is like the breeding grounds of the spoonbill sandpiper now. So it's like where you get these. It's like the ridge at Kemlin. You get like a bay with a shingle ridge over it, with an inlet coming out on one end. This is the sort of habitat and the vegetation that the spoonbill sandpiper likes to breed on. It's crowberries and lots of lichen, very short Arctic tundra. And there's these terminal moraine hills within 5 kilometers 5 kilometers of the coast. This is basically the habitat. It's very restricted, really. These little mound areas, and also the spits at the mouth of these bays. So we did a little bit of an organised walk, trying to, places where they've had them before, just doing like survey work, really, just trying to see if we could find any. Some of the botany though was fantastic. That's like an exotic bleeding heart, I was told, but a really nice looking sort of flower there. That's a beautiful flower. And we also had some of these like pale phase bears, which was great to see. I think that in America, don't they call them spirit bears, but they're very pale compared to the other brown bears that we were watching. We came across this grey-crowned rosy finch, which was, we didn't know that they were actually on the mainland. So normally they're just supposed to be on the Commander Islands, and they've got, it's quite really nice looking bird. So along with the harlequin ducks, we also had some Stella's eider, but end of June, beginning of July, they're pretty much all in eclipse plumage, so they weren't the best looking. This afternoon, we were on a boat with Costa. So if you look behind, there's a Stella's sea lion on that rock. So because we were with Costa, obviously we got closer, nice chap, and got as close as we could, and even closer again. And it got to the point where we thought, if this sea lion jumps out now, it could land in the Zodiac, and that would be quite interesting then, because I'm sure they could give you a bit of a bite if they wanted to. So yeah, so thankfully it didn't, but it was just great to see it up close. Now, there's the unpredictable nature of some of these things, because bear in mind we're miles from anywhere, so there's 2 anchors on the ship, and one day we lost one of the anchors. It obviously just broke free. So if we lost both of them, then you've got a bit of an issue there, because getting on and off the boat is going to be a lot more difficult if you're doing it from a moving vessel. So late that afternoon, we did another bit of coastal tundra, trying to see if we could find any spoonbill sandpipers. As the summer warms up, obviously you get more midges and mozzies and things like that. But thankfully, that afternoon they were all on the other side of this little river. So yeah, just working the area, trying to see what we can find. More of the Mongolian sand plovers. There's Neil getting quite close to one, because they're very tame. This was one of Tim's photos, because there was quite a few redneck stints in this area. I didn't get any close photos of redneck stint. I just had a few flight shots, but you can see they're quite similar, redneck stints, to spoonbill sandpipers. Similar size, similar coloration, just obviously the bill shape is different. And so whenever a small group of redneck stints took off, I took some shots just in case, so we could have a look later on. And then that night when I got back, I was looking at some of the shots, and I looked at this pitch light, and I thought, oh, the right middle berth, oh my God, look at the bill. It's a spoonbill sandpiper. So anyway, I ran in and told everyone, and everyone got excited. And then I went back to my room, and then I kind of looked forward and backwards, and I realized that it was just the wing was superimposed over the head end, and it made it look like it had a bulbous end to the bill, and it was just a redneck stint. But you could see why I got a bit excited. So I kind of like I felt really high and then went down low again. So there's Kenny doing the log of an evening. There's Chris Collins. He was the resident ornithologist on the boat. And if you look on the bar there, there's that day Chris had absolutely ragged one of Rodney's propellers. So Rodney removed it and put it on the bar. So like it was like the cone of shame for Chris, because obviously Rodney's not happy that Chris had ragged one of his propellers, so he's going to have to replace that. So next morning we pulled into this place called Natali, where there's an old disused crab factory. As we pulled in, there was these things, and they were blowing a bit like a whale, and thought, what's that? And then as we got closer and realised that there were walruses, and you can see how close we were actually getting to these walruses, and fabulous looking creatures. Obviously, I'd never seen them before, and there was a big group of them there. If you look at the lips, they're very muscular, because apparently they use their tusks. One of the things they use their tusks for is actually to scraping through the sand on the seabed to get bivalves, clams, what have you. And the muscular lips apparently can suck the meat out of these clams. So that's why they got these really, really muscular lips. And they've got these totally bloodshot eyes. They look like they've been on a massive session for 24 hours. But fantastic just to see them up close there. Over the years, I've had a few comments about this, thinking, what on earth is that on your shoulder? But it's a walrus skull that someone found, not on this beach, on another beach. The tip of the tusk was just sticking above the sand. He was just like kicking it, what's that? And then he cleared the sand, and it was like this massive male walrus's skull that they took back onto the boat, and it didn't halfway heavy. But it interesting to see up close. And you can see just like they got these like just a few sort of premolary molar like teeth probably for grinding up those clams once they've sucked them out the shell. So there we have it. I think that was probably the favourite shot that I actually got of one in the wild, of the walrus. Now this is an old disused Soviet base, and I think Soviet Union was at Boxing Day 1991 when it broke down. So when that happened, they withdrew a lot of people from some of the far-flung places like this place here. Now on the cliff, they used to have breeding white-faced gyrfalcons. Unfortunately, this was actually Anglesey show. This is it's a white-faced gyre with 1/16 acre falcon in it, because falconers do like to hybridize falcons. But there were signs at the airport. It's a bit of a problem over there, because what they do, apparently, local villagers, they'll get a feral pigeon and they'll put loads of fishing line around it and peg it down. And then any peregrines or gyrfalcons, like when they're moving around, they're coming down the coast, they will take the pigeon and get snagged up. And then they will catch that falcon, whether it's a peregrine or a gyrfalcon, and then they'll smuggle them out of the country to the Middle East, where they'll get big money for them. You know, so that's kind of like a sad thing. And that was a bit of a worry, because most years they get gyrfalcon on the cliff that we went to, but sadly the year we went, we didn't have any gyrfalcons, which is a shame, because they're magnificent ones, especially the white phase ones. But quite interesting to see this old derelict broken military base. The only things inhabiting it now are things like red fox. Eastern yellow wagtail was breeding around there. Red-throated pipit. But you've got to be careful, because even though nature's taking over, you still got to keep an eye out for these man-made 6-inch nails, because one of those goes through your foot, it's not going to be pretty. But other birds breeding around there, things like little bunting, and it was quite nice birding. There wasn't a lot, but what there was good stuff. It was very quiet and still that day, and we had a pair of hooper swans came flying out of the valley with this fantastic sort of looking mountain ridges behind. So that was dead silence, just the sound of 2 hooper swans flying out the valley. Funnily enough, bumped into. It didn't seem warm enough for butterflies, but that looks like green vein white. And the first place I ever saw Snowdon lily in the wild was in the Russian Far East. And these are several Lloydias, several Snowdon lilies, which seems quite bizarre. I have done the pilgrimage twice since up Snowdon to see Snowdon lily on Snowdon, but the first place I saw it in the world was actually in the Russian Far East. Other birds we had around there, things like dusky thrush, and that was great just to see them in the breeding plumage, and pika. I think that's related to rabbits. Very cute, make this funny squeaky noise. They sound a bit like bramblings actually, but they were good to see. And they just blend in. They breed on these like rocky areas, and they just blend in so well. Fine breeding plumage, snow bunting, great to see, and Siberian accent. And this was before the Siberian accenters hit Britain, so it was like, whoa! I've actually seen the Siberian accenter, but the subspecies they get over, it's a bit weird looking, because it's very pale. Because if you look at like the ones that have turned up in Britain, they're very buffy on the face, but these ones were very, very sort of like, they weren't buffy at all, like very pale yellowy throat and a white supercilium. Other things like red flanked bluetail, that was great to see. And the only path there, years ago, that would have been made by the army, but that's actually from a burr that had just been for walking up and down there every day. But as we were waiting to be picked up and taken back, Kenny and Kat, I don't think you came on this bit. This was the day when you infamously went looking for snow sheep, but that's what you missed while you were getting snow sheep. But I think it was Yuri was the Russian ornithologist there. He was great because while we were waiting, just got a little fire going, got a brew going, gives a cup of tea and a little bag of sweets. So like we were quite happy, and the rest of the group, I think they felt like they were missing out a little bit. And then they realised, like, sort of that I was taking photographs, and then they cheered up a little bit. So it's like we were having a good time, really. Yeah. So anyway, that was back to the ship. They were Mark Hughes' socks, actually. I took them to Russia. He lent them me once, and so I took them around the world because they were very comfortable. There's Dave kicking off about the mess on my side of the room. But again, Dave is a lovely man, really. And to be fair, he's great bloke to share the room with. So the last sort of day or two, we were basically heading into prime spoony habitat. Apuka Lagoon, as we arrived there, another ex-military base, and there was grey whales. Very ridged on the back. These are the ones that winter off the coast of a place like Baja, California. The walruses, you could smell their breath. It wasn't actually that bad. It was kind of like clam chowdery, but it wasn't unpleasant. Whereas like grey whales were like rank fish halitosis. It wasn't good. If you had the choice, I'd sniff a walrus any day over a grey whale. But some good birds that we had around there as well. That's Kitlitz's murrelet. wonderful little bird, you know, like related to auks and what have you. And looking at the coloration, they're a bit coloured like a golden plover. That's because they nest further inland, and they tend to nest in the areas where there's heather. So it's so they can actually blend in with the vegetation instead of like just nesting in the little holes right on the shore. So amongst this kittiwake flock on the left, we had the fine looking breeding plumage Sabine's gull. So that was a good one to see. What's that? Ironically, that was Greater Manchester Pennington Flash, probably the one I've got closest to. That was a one summer, yeah, we just had the one when we were out in Russia, but again, it was in nice breeding plumage, so that was good to see. And on the old disused buildings, there was glaucous gulls in full adults in breeding plumage, which was good. And again, some of these molting flocks of Stella's Ida just whizzing past the group there. So on the Arctic tundra, nice scenic shot there of two Arctic skuas mobbing a white-tailed seagull. And as we were walking on the shore, we must have been quite close. We never found any eggs or chicks, but we were obviously close to the skua's nest because they were feigning like a broken wing to try and lure us away. So getting mobbed there. And again, all these little pools have got long-tailed ducks on them. Nice to see they've got the endemic Kamchatka rhododendron, this little dwarf rhododendron, carpeting the Arctic tundra. Fabulous little plant to see, and some different types of saxifrages. Again, quite strange because that part of Russia, it's where it meets Alaska. So you get some American birds that come over, and like sandhill cranes are actually breeding in that area. So it seems a bit weird seeing what we always think of as an American bird in essentially the Palearctic. I went looking for one of these because they had been seen to come down over a mound. And as I went over this mound, there was this massive brown bear kind of walking towards me. So I didn't go any closer. I was a little bit of a way away from the group. So I backed up the hill a bit, got a bit close to the group. And it was only then when it either saw me or smelled my socks or something like that. But by this point, I was that much close to the group where I thought, if the bear charges me, I knew that I could run back to the group and that I'd probably be able to run faster than some of the tour participants. So then gave myself, a better chance of survival. But thankfully, it wasn't particularly bothered and it just moved off because you can see it had obviously been in some form of fight anyway because it had some scratches on its face, but it was a big old bear that was. So this always reminds me of Kemlin. As I say, you've got these spits over these inlets. There's the rest of the group waiting for me, probably because I'd kind of gone off at a tangent again, looking for, I think we were looking at Pacific golden plovers were breeding around there as well. As we headed back, Costa had to tow in Megan's Zodiac, and it got a bit close and it punctured it, and Rodney, the guy in charge, went mental. I never heard so much swearing. It was unbelievable. And like everyone on the boat's just like, our heads just went into our jackets like turtles as he was absolutely railroading Costa because the following day was D-Day. It was the day we were going for the Spoonies, the best site, and he said he was going to have to be up all night doing a puncture repair on the boat, blah blah blah. So that was all a bit sort of scary. So we pulled up then next morning. Minor Pilgino. It's this is the place where people go to see breeding plumage spoonbill sandpipers. That's where they're doing the sort of head starting project. And when we got there, it was foggy, and it was like, oh, are we going to be able to go ashore? So it was all a bit like touch and go at one point, and it was a bit. It was like D-Day. You sort of think, oh, are we going to get to go ashore? And it's like the butterflies was unbelievable. I think last time I had butterflies for that was like doing my finals exams. And there was also the worry of like, what if we don't see it? You've gone on this trip to see spoonbill sandpiper and you come back and like, if you say, actually, we didn't see any, and it's like, oh no. But we got ashore because the fog cleared a little bit, and we got met by one of the Russian ornithologists. And you can see the sort of habitat that they nest on. It's just like fine lichen, very low-lying Arctic tundra. And this is it. I mean, this is where they nest. But there's no really diagnostic features. And it's not like they could put a traffic cone there because it'll draw attention to it from something. So they have to use GPS. So we got to roughly the right area. And then he's checking on his GPS. And the next minute we heard preep, right, spoonbill sandpiper. It had obviously flown off its nest, but nobody saw it. There was one guy on the flank on the left. He'd broken away a bit because he needed a wee, right? And it kind of flew past him, but he didn't get a great view. And thankfully, he didn't hit the spoonbill sandpiper. But then you think, oh no, what about that? And it's like, is that it? You know, what if we get home and they say, did you see Spoonbill Sandpiper? And you go, no, but we heard it. You know, it's like, oh no, it's like, it's not it wasn't going the way I thought it might. But then luckily about 5 minutes later, we heard it again. Reep. And then I managed to sort of spot it. It landed there. And it's like, oh my God. Right. So Spoonbill Sandpiper in breeding plumage. But the rest of the group, because they'd split the whole group in two, we go into two separate nests. No one else in the group could see it apart from me. And I could see in the background on the mountains, there was some snow, and there was like a sort of a sickle shape, moon shape of snow. And I got the group onto it and said, like, look, come down. It's just near the big pink flowers. And luckily, you know, managed to get onto it. Now, this was Dave. I wasn't really planning on using my scope much on the trip, but I wanted my scope for when I actually watched the Spoonbill Sandpipers, and I didn't want to be in a queue because you think, I don't know how long we're going to get on it. I'm going to take it. But Dave, fair play to him, because he saw I had my camera and stuff. He said, Steve, if I carry a scope, will you let me have a look at it? So I said, yeah, okay. Because I like Dave. Dave's lovely, right? So because I didn't want a queue behind me. I was like, you know, that's what the tour leaders are there for with their telescopes. So anyway, I set the scope up. There's Spoonbill Sandpiper in the middle of the scope. And he's like, Dave, can you see it? Can you see it? Can you see it? No, I can't see it, Steve. Right. So then, like, I have a look in the middle, and it's like, it's still there. It's like, Dave, it's there. It's there. Can you see it? Can you see it? And it's like, oh yeah, I can see it. And then it's like, oh great. It's like, hooray, finally, Dave can see the Spoonbill Sandpiper, you know. And then, you know, we got fantastic views where like Dave had a good look, and then I got a good look and got a bit of wobbly video footage. And I honestly felt like I'd won sort of the, you know, the Happy Bunnies. I felt like we'd won the Champions League final. It was just absolutely amazing. It's just like one of the best birding moments ever. And just great to see such a fabulous bird in breeding plumage there. So it was just a treat to see it on its breeding grounds like that. So, you know, that's a better picture there from Chris Collins, who was working for Heritage then. But, you know, it was nice. This was just a video grab of one of the bits of wobbly video footage that I got. But I just love the little ducky-shaped beaks and bills, and just fabulous looking bird. So, you know, really great to see. You know, we came away, but it's like one of those moments there you realise that the pressures it's against, because as we came away, you know, you can see all the skewers, you know, sort of long-tailed skewers and Arctic skewers, and you know, they're kind of in the habitat where that, you know, they've got to put up with these marauders every day. So anyway, we got back on the boat, and then as we were going back, sort of the cherry on the cake was we had beluga whales just came in into the inlet as we were just going out. Just fantastic to see the sort of melon-shaped heads and just snow-coloured. So it was just an amazing moment. And a local fisherman went past, and he passed some salmon over to us. And that night, and we dropped off we were carrying 2 Russian ornithologists with us, so they were going to be doing some more work with the spoonies. So we dropped those off while they carried on the breeding grounds there. And we got back to the ship for the night, and we had like a celebratory feast, which was absolutely wonderful. So we got back to Anadyr, famous for Roman Abramovich, who owns Chelsea. He was in charge there. He brought it back from the brink after the Soviet Union collapsed. So we had when we got into Anadyr, we had a new anchor put back on the ship. As we docked, there was other beluga whales there, not as aesthetically pleasing in those waters as the ones we saw earlier, and then we got sort of Arctic ground squirrels running around as we're disembarking. So we said our farewells to everyone in the group there pretty much, and headed off back to the west. So here's a shot. We went to the museum in Liverpool, and there's a shot of my young son Sean with a Spoonbill Sandpiper in Liverpool from from years ago. But I really hope, with all, everything they're doing, that it doesn't just end up that it's going to end up a thing of museum cabinets. One of the good things, especially, is the Head Start and its boosted numbers. So that the numbers have been boosted by a quarter. 163 birds released so far. The increase in the output global population by 20%. That's fabulous news. I wish them all the best in Slimbridge, but in, I think, is it 8 years, they've only managed to successfully rear 2 chicks that have actually fledged and are in the population now. So it's not, I mean, it's obviously got very specific needs. If it's population maximum was about 2,000 in the 70s. So, you know, I do hope they're obviously trying to tweak things every year. I hope they have success with that. But I suppose the main thing is if they can keep this head starting going and get the population, and a lot of the where the estuaries are being built on in like places like China and South Korea, they are starting to be aware and stopping that, because they are aware that it's absolutely hammering the wildlife there. So there are some, you know, and they're trying to educate people where there's nets, you know, to stop doing it. So, you know, things are moving in the right direction, but obviously there's still a long way to go. But I just hope that, you know, this fantastic bird that I was really, really lucky to see gets a chance and does come back and starts to thrive again in the future. So thank you very much. Thanks for watching me, and I've enjoyed sort of reliving the trip myself, which was probably the most exciting trip I've ever been on in my life. So thank you very much. Thank you.
Thanks, Steve.